Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not by the standards of Capcom's best work. So the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite. The article misconstrues the story of Resident Evil 5. IGN rated the original Resident Evil 5 a 9 out of 10. Huh? Why? What's wrong with Resident Evil 5? Oh wow, this is 5 million views and 1,000 likes? This is really bad. So why is it bad? Resident Evil game that can't be remade.
Released last year, Capcom's project to remake the glory years of its survival horror series is complete. But as the game's post-credit scene suggests, the remakes aren't over. And so the big question is, where next? The obvious answer is a remake of Resident Evil 5. But on the game's 15th anniversary, it's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era. An era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work. And so the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite.
Why? I still don't know why.
Resident Evil is a survival horror series. Not that you'd know that playing Resident Evil 5. Sure,
Is it fucking stupid of me that every single time that I see a bridge, I think of PewDiePie? It's been like 7 or 8 years, and I still see it, and I'm like, I remember whenever he said the thing.
Sure, it features a constant flow of horrific imagery, but Resident Evil 5 is an action game through and through. That's evident in its cover shooter mechanics, vehicle chases with on-rails turret sequences, and the constant rattle of assault rifles. Even its visual design evokes the sandy shades of modern military games that experienced mass popularity in the late 2000s.
Sure.
It all speaks to a series that had lost its way. Rather than reflect on the tenets that were the foundation of its experience, Resident Evil 5 looked to the contemporary gaming zeitgeist in an attempt to find a new lease of life. The result is an unholy hybrid of Resident Evil, Gears of War, and Call of Duty.
Well, I mean, I think this is fair for him to say, absolutely. If he's saying that, like, basically, was Resident Evil 5 did they try to, like, do, like, what Halo 4 did? Where they made, like, loadouts and they tried to make Halo more like Call of Duty? Is that kind of... The issue is not the gameplay. Yeah, because, like, I don't know if that's really it's the only good co-op Resident Evil. Yeah, I don't know.
It's as ugly and unwieldy as it sounds. This design appears to not just be a misguided attempt to follow Western successes, but also a misreading of its predecessor. With Resident Evil 4, director Shinji Mikami deftly reinvented the series through the use of a new over-the-shoulder camera angle. The perspective allowed for a more kinetic, action-heavy game. Despite this, Mikami never lost sight of the terror at the core of Resident Evil. Through the use of enemies that were strategically placed to provide undulating waves of tension and fear, and the inclusion of Ashley as your vulnerable charge, combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with increasingly powerful weaponry. Their purpose is cannon fodder.
That sounds like a game that I would like. I remember I didn't like playing Resident Evil because I had to always think about how much ammo I had, and I thought that was really boring. And I was like, I want to play a game where it's like me versus 1,000 zombies, and I have a machine gun with infinite ammo and a lightsaber. That's all. And like, maybe I can get in a car, basically do them. Yeah, I know. That's the way I see it. Well, it's not, it's a survival game. I know, it's not Resident Evil. Like, it's the same thing I said about Assassin's Creed, right? Is that I don't like the aesthetic of Assassin's Creed. I don't like the gameplay of it. Like, I don't like the whole stealth, hiding, sneaking around. Like, I think it's cringe. So whenever I saw that, like, Valhalla kind of appealed to me, I would actually even see that as an L. Because an Assassin's Creed game shouldn't appeal to me. Because I'm not the target audience. And so, yeah, maybe you're right. And I think that, like, yeah, I know that there are people that like that, you know, some people like things I don't like, right? I guess this is one of them.
A wall of meat to slow your progress through levels.
Rising?
And those
Bro,
levels are not
that
locations to be explored. Instead, they are largely
I had that
funnels
on a
that push you
360.
from entrance to exit. Resident Evil 4 may have replaced the series'
Shoot the
traditional
cop.
continuous structure with discrete levels in an attempt to move away from the backtracking-heavy design of previous games,
geez.
but it preserved the spirit of locations like the Raccoon City police station. The village, Salazar's castle, and the island feature interlocking, explorable pathways that solidify these locations as authentic spaces rather than obstacle courses. Resident Evil 5 has no interest in this, with the majority of its stages being little more than corridors peppered with dead ends to hide treasures in. Their lack of authenticity means no one will ever mention the Kajuju Autonomous Zone in the same breath as the Spencer Mansion.
Just shoot him in the leg.
All this is to say that a faithful remake of Resident Evil 5 would break Capcom's 7-year streak of brilliant survival horror games. It's telling that the series' reset point, Resident Evil 7, was a reinvention of the very first game, a haunted house that grew ever larger as you unlocked new rooms by solving its puzzles. Clever reinventions of this base conceit is the key to Resident Evil's success, be that dropping
This
an
is the one I
unstoppable
played.
force into the house's
Yeah, I remember
corridors,
playing this
such
one
as
here.
Resident Evil 2's Mr. X, or expanding the scope of the house. Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors are streets, and its rooms are houses. Resident Evil 5's stage-driven structure is simply inferior to this design. A modern recreation of it would only further highlight its flaws, especially...
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think it really kind of depends. I mean, like, some people probably... Like, what did any of you guys like Resident Evil 5? I never played it, so I'm not sure. But I feel like this is probably the kind of game that, like, some people probably did like, and then other people didn't, and it was just like, maybe it alienated, like, base fans of the game, and so, yeah, I can get that. It was the best co-op, but not the best one. Yeah.
Actually coming in such close proximity to masterclasses like the remake of Resident Evil 2. Remakes can, of course, completely redefine the structure of their source material. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, is recognisably
that was cool.
an updated version
I saw
of the classic
the
RPG,
comparison to that.
but its world design and gameplay mechanics are a world apart from the 1997 original.
Yeah?
And so you could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake. A whole new environmental structure and scenario design that reins in the action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem: racism.
What?
Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. Yes,
Well, that's because it's in Africa. I would assume that Ghost of Tsushima, the primary antagonists in that game were probably Japanese, right? Mongols? Okay. Mongols, we get the point? Yeah.
it's technically the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting. But the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. Intentionally...
I mean, there's a lot of places in Africa that are fucking primitive. Like, yeah. That's... No shit. Like, what do you... this is so weird. It's a true... Yeah, it's a literal true statement. It's not racist.
or not, Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the Dark Continent, an uncivilized world harboring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security.
Well, that's a stretch, isn't it? I feel like that's a bit of a, like, oh my god. That's a huge stretch. Like, don't they have, like, a virus or something like that in, like, the game? I mean, it's not like he's going to Africa and just, like, shooting all the black people, is he? Like, that's not the game, is it? I'm pretty sure that's not the game. This is crazy. What's wrong with people? The main villains are white? Yeah, like, so it's 457. I remember looking at this, and some of the villains in here, like these bad guys, some of them were white.
Previous games.
So, like, what is this? The reason is why, it was according to the director, they considered Africa the birth of humanity and wanted to do stuff with that idea. Well, yeah, it's not, I would not say it is, I don't know the current thinking, but whenever I was in school, we were taught that people came from Africa. That's what I learned, right? Is that, it probably originally came from Africa. So this is actually kind of true. And it's like, if you look at pictures of Africa, there are really nice cities and there's great places in Africa. And there's places that look like this. That's the way it is.
global security. This insensitive treatment of people of colour was hotly debated
It's crazy.
even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer,
Oh
with
my
writers
God.
such as Ngai Kroll and Stephen Totillo pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. The argument
Post-colonial imagery. God, bro, like, somebody needs to stop Western journalists. Somebody needs to stop them. Yeah, that is it. They're zombies. Yeah, these are zombies, and they've had like I could understand. It's like if every single Resident Evil game was set in Africa and you're only killing black people, where it's like, ah, man, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, maybe it's a duck. But like, there's like, what, 15, 20 other games? And this is in one of the games, so it's probably not like a racist fantasy of gunning down minorities. Well, not even minorities. I mean, that's you go to Africa, oh wow, everybody around me is a minority. Like, they're not really even minorities, but like, what I'm saying is like, it's just such an insane thing to say.
some think pieces continued well into the game's release window, with IGN's own former editor-in-chief Hillary Goldstein having also wrestled with the subject.
Is it racist? So you can't shoot black people in the game? This is a video game. Like, I would understand if it was like something like it's just, what is wrong with these people, man? Where are they coming from? This is our culture. I am so sorry if you live in like Brazil, or you live in Korea, or you live in China, or, you know, Japan, and you have to deal with our shit. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'd like to apologize on behalf of all of the bored white people here in America. I'm so sorry we're doing this to you. I really don't want... I didn't want to do this. I'm not part of this. I'm not part of the system. But holy fuck. Yeah, as an American, I apologize. Yeah, I'm just so sorry. Its PR team explained this stuff. I think even Capcom went to try to add more light-skinned enemies among the zombies. Yeah, but I mean, it's just... Again, like... it's so weird. You know what I said before about how, like, Western media has to make sure that all media is reinforcing, like, current social norms? Like, all social norms have to be reinforced through media, and you can't actually have media that is a suspension of social norms? I think this is an example of that. This is a really good example of that. Is that these people are unable to, you know, have any degree of willing suspension of disbelief. 2009, by the way. Oh, yeah. IGN gave this game a 9 out of 10, by the way. Yeah, I'll look at it in a minute. They want everything to reflect their ideology. Exactly, yeah. And that's really what it comes down to, is that these people are trying to co-opt, you know, like, media and use it as a vehicle to tell their story, right? To push their narrative. It's not about whether something is accurate or not. I mean, anybody knows. I mean, like, there's a lot of places in Africa that really fucking suck. Like, where was Joseph Kony from? So, and this isn't like a fucking... You're not dissing Africa by saying this. Like, there's places in the U.S. that are really fucking bad, too. There's places everywhere. Like, it's not racist. That's just how it is. Jesus.
But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality. In the 2020s...
Reality? Yeah, that was back whenever people had free speech and they could talk about this kind of stuff without getting worried about getting deplatformed and having all of their sponsors taken away from them and getting banned on social media. Yeah, it was a conversation because the other normal people could actually speak, and now they can't. You can't even have this type of perspective. This is the problem. It wasn't a reality then. Yeah, it's incredible.
In a post-Black Lives Matter world, there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game. No.
No, I disagree with that. No, I really don't think so. And I think also, like, it's very kind of odd to hear this coming from somebody who has an accent that's clearly not American. Like, this is an American issue. Like, what are you doing talking about this? It's Western culture. It's primarily American culture.
I have a job to do, and I'm gonna see it through.
Remakes may be able to redefine their source material, but there's only so many changes you can make until it's not a remake at all, but an entirely new game. And if you take Africa out of Resident Evil 5, is it Resident Evil 5 anymore? Even with a vastly improved, more sensitive take on the continent, perhaps one with a black protagonist and a more empathetic look at the outbreak, the experience...
Why would making it a black protagonist why would that make it better? Like, it's crazy. Like, what is wrong with these people, man? Like, you've got, like, these people, like, need to be stopped. Like, who is listening to this and thinking, oh, yeah, true?
Would simply be too divorced from the original to hold the name Resident Evil 5. So where does Capcom go now? Personally, I'd look backwards. Code Veronica is an ideal candidate, as is the original Resident Evil, but if the only way is chronologically forward, then a total rewrite of what comes next is the logical path. Because what followed Resident Evil 4 was not one terrible game, but two. Resident Evil 6 tripled down on the action-packed, set-piece heavy shooter design, to the extent that much of it could be mistaken for a third-person Call of Duty spin-off were it not for the monsters.
Sounds like a game I'd like.
Level design practically puts you in a chokehold, forcing you to endure a barrage of bombastic moments that have no interest in evoking any sense of fear. Resident Evil 6 is a survival horror, only in that it's a horrible game that you have to survive playing. But this time around,
it's like an
it
arcade
doesn't
game,
have to
you
be
know?
like that. Capcom now has the opportunity to ignore the past and completely reinvent this chunk of the timeline.
Yeah.
In Resident Evil 4 Remake's post-credit scene, evil mastermind Albert Wesker details his plans for world domination to Ada Wong. Reflected in his glasses is an image of Excella Gione and the Stairway of the Sun, two significant plot elements from Resident Evil 5, which indicates Capcom's intentions. But there's more to consider. This scene is largely a replication of the sequence from Assignment Ada, a non-canon chapter from the original Resident Evil 4. Its shift from unofficial to canon points to a willingness to change. Furthermore, the end of this scene is completely rewritten. When learning of Wesker's plans, rather than dutifully deliver the stolen Las Plagas sample to him, Ada betrays her shadowy boss and forces her helicopter to turn around. In this moment, the future of Resident Evil becomes unclear. Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5. For more on how Capcom is altering the series, check out our video on the biggest changes in Resident Evil 4 Remake. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Yeah, so anyway, you can tell that this kind of stuff isn't popular because you literally can't even comment on it. And apparently Resident Evil 5, they gave, what was the review? So whenever the game came out, they gave the game a 9 out of 10, is that right? Verdict, it's a 9, so the game's amazing. Oh my God, where are these people? What is this? Like, people are never going to get over, like, this race shit whenever they look at every interaction between two people of different races as a, like, they just basically turned it into stereotype. It's like everything is removed, the context, the nuance, the reality is removed, and you're just looking at this. Like, we're never going to get past this if every single time that you see a video game where like you're shooting zombies in Africa, you're thinking about like police officers in America shooting people, or like George Floyd. Like, what the fuck? Who does this? Like, what's wrong? Like, this, it's such a stupid way of thinking. I think the problem is that these people want to put out like a certain narrative and they don't want other people to like really talk about it. And I think the issue also is like, I mean, they can shut down comments on it. I mean, that's up to them. Like, that's fine, but let's not pretend like we don't know the reason why. The reason why is because they're going, like, they posted this without having comments enabled, right? It's not like they disabled comments halfway through it. So they knew whenever they posted this that it would be extremely unpopular. They knew that. And are there any comments on this? Oh, there's no comments that are available. So, like, you don't really know what people are talking about with this either. And so, yeah, do they even allow comments? I mean, on usually, like, if you look at IGN, let me pull up the last 5. We don't need to. We can see it right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, in a general sense, they do. I'm trying to look for another example where they didn't. And it seems like, no, this is actually kind of quite an anomaly. So yeah, on YouTube there are comments, quote, retweets on YouTube. Oh yeah, no, I have no doubt that people disagree with this. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that we're ever going to get over like this kind of like like diluting a person down to race thing. I don't think we're ever going to be able to get over that as like a culture until people stop viewing every interaction between different races of people as interactions between races of people. And I actually think that these people are like massively they're very reductive, and I think that they work backwards in terms of like progress of people like being able to see each other, because a normal person can see this and be like, yeah, it's in Africa, of course that's how it is. I don't think anybody, any reasonable like normal person is going to see this and be like, oh wow, this is just like in America where cops shoot black people. Like it's what the fuck? Who does that? Like I feel like that's almost like a self-report. That's incredible. Morgan Freeman once said, to end racism, just stop talking about it. Well, I think it's very simple, right? If you want to get rid of people that are racist, you look at the reasons why people are racist, figure out why that is, see if you can, like work with those people. And then after that, I think treating people fairly is the only way you can really do that. That's the only way. And if you don't do that, nothing else is going to work. Slamming with reality. Yeah, you just have to. And the other thing is like, this is another very important thing, is that you can never make people like this happy, because the only reason why we're paying attention to them is because they're not happy. So you think about like what the feedback loop for that is. These people are going to be constantly reminded to complain and cry about everything like this, because that's the only way they have any validity and any importance in society at all. Because nobody would actually sit there and listen to their opinion on the game as a baseline. So they have to like kind of pepper in these like super radical things and like these like crazy takes in order to get people to still pay attention to it. And also like the other factor is that if you make them happy, then they lose power, because the only power they had was your desire to make them happy. So they're never going to be happy because they want power, just like every other group of people does. But the issue is that whenever you make them happy, you destroy the product. And so, yes, I think this is a very big problem. IGN courageously didn't allow any comments on the article. Yeah, exactly. I don't get why y'all don't see a problem having black zombies. You're basically calling them inhumane. Just have what? This has got to be a troll. It's suspended already. Oh god. Okay, yeah, never mind. Oh my god. They're obsessed with race. Yeah, the people that fixate on this kind of stuff, you will never win with them. You'll never do something that will make them happy. You'll never like satisfy their needs. You'll never do enough. There's always going to be more that you need to do. There's always something else that needs to happen. There's always, oh, well, it's not quite right. These are people, yeah, they're miserable people. They're constantly fucking annoying, and it's never going to improve. So, yeah, there's thousands of them on Twitter. Yeah, there's thousands of them on Twitter, but there's millions of people that are normal. That's the reality. Is that, and this is one of the silver linings here, is that most people see this type of like this conversation and they're like, oh, these people are fucking morons, right? That's it. And I think that the stranglehold that these types of organizations had, because like, for example, like what this guy said in the article was definitely true. He said like, it used to be a conversation about this and now we just tell people what to think. And he said that as a good thing, but the truth is that that is what happened. Is that you used to be able to openly discuss things like this, and then you weren't able to anymore, because if you did, you would be completely deplatformed. So now that that's kind of changing again, and people are able to discuss it, well, now people are getting upset. Fired from your job. Yeah, exactly. People who disagree get fired. Exactly, yeah, because they'll immediately go after your real life. Because, like, from their perspective, like, you have to understand that, like, if you have this level of brain rot, which is probably worse than all of the zombies in this game, you would think that a person who enjoys and is advocating for this wants to kill black people, right? So if you thought somebody did that, like, you would feel like this guy's like a murderer. And so, like, I want to let people know, and, like, I really want to hold this person accountable for being, like, wanting to be a murderer. So, like, from their mind, they're morally justified to stalk you, dox you, find out where you live, harass your employer, because like in their mind, you are a mass murderer. They're not people, they're zombies. So that's just what happens, right? I mean, fuck. Because even black people ended up donations, white guy shooting them is still problematic. Fair logic. Yeah, again, I think every normal person, and I bet like the reality is there's probably a lot of black people that think this is stupid too. Like I would argue that a lot of them are like, yeah, I mean, if they made, and I, like, as I said, if it was Resident Evil and every Resident Evil game was about shooting black people, then it'd be like, I think I see what you're trying to do here, right? But this is one game. There's clearly not like some sort of like racist intent behind it or something like that. And it's, again, such a dishonest interpretation. Normal people don't even see the color. I mean, I think normal people do see color. Of course they do. I mean, people have different skin color. That's like, for example, it's like I would recognize somebody's hair color. You see it. It's just you're not supposed to define somebody on it, right? I mean, damn. Journalists were upset that zombies were black in Africa. Yeah, I mean, holy shit, man. I recommend East of You game. I thought it was remake. Thought 5 was great. I never played it myself. So IGN, it's okay to shoot infected Spanish people in Resident Evil 4. It's also okay to shoot infected Serbian and Chinese people in Resident Evil 6. But shooting infected African people in Resident Evil 5 is racist. Well, you have to understand the reason why. The reason why is because this is completely from a reference point of American racial politics. And it's contextualized with slavery, right? Because we had slavery for a long time. And by the way, so did everywhere else, but we did it too. And so because of that, that's why it's different. Now, by the way, Chinese, Japanese, not the same thing, but I would say in general, we also had internment camps for Japanese. And if you had a game like this in Japan, I don't think they'd be complaining either. I think they'd feel the same about it as with China. So it's very weird to me that these people have such a, it's what's very weird to me is that these people seem to have all of these positions of, I mean, like pseudo importance, right? It's not really important. Like you work at a IGN or something like that. Like it's not like this is really a position of power, but like how do people that have like these mindsets that are so clearly unpopular with seemingly everybody on the internet here, how are these the ones that have that are working at these websites? Like what's going on? How does this keep happening? And I think that fundamentally it's a huge problem where the people that are making content and the people that are like, and this is the same thing with like a streamer too, it always becomes a huge issue whenever a streamer wants something different than their audience. And I think it's the same thing with journalism and media as well. It's a huge issue if there's like a really big divide between like what the people that are creating the content want and what the people who are consuming the content want. And if there's dissonance between those two things, you're going to have so many problems. And you're seeing it happen now, right? It's happening everywhere. Because seemingly a lot of these people, and this is also like another big issue, is that these people are extremely narcissistic, in my opinion, because they view these video games and how they're pushing these video games as like a public service. It's not like, oh, I'm reporting on video games. No, you're actually fighting for race relations. You're trying to improve racism in the world. No, you're not. It's a video game. You're not doing anything. You're just wasting your time writing articles about a video game that nobody cares about. You're not saving people's lives. You're not actually helping homeless people. You're not helping actual people in Africa. You're probably writing articles about how Mr. Beast is bad for doing that. It's just, they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing. They're creating nothing. They're contributing nothing. They're worth nothing. And that's actually not even true. Because if they were doing nothing and worth nothing, everything would be fine. But the worst part is that they try to take other things and make them even worse. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's the narcissistic, like, savior complex that they have. That they're going to go in and, like, help racism in this video game. They're a net negative, yes. They're a social plague. They are. Yeah, lazy savior complex. Because, like, obviously there are people that, like, work for, like, Doctors Without Borders. There are people who go and volunteer at a Salvation Army or at a Goodwill. There are people who work at animal shelters. There are people who are trying to actually improve the world. And all of those people are doing infinitely more to make the world a better place than a person who's writing an article about how a video game is racist because it's set in Africa. That's the truth. Asmongold 5 is to show the virus went around the world. These people don't understand the story. Well, of course they don't understand the story. One thing that you have to understand is that the people who write these articles these are the people who took like AP English in like 11th or 12th grade and think that they can break down like the narrative reasons for everything. And they talk about how other people aren't media literate because they don't see media the same way that they do. They're like the pinnacle of slightly above intelligence. And the thing is, like, even dumb people can tell that they're stupid, though.